This is a really terrifying tale from a passenger on board a Southwest Airlines flight. It was flight 3426 heading to RDU yesterday when this passenger says the plane suddenly began dropping out of the sky. The pilot saying over the loudspeaker, "We are going down." Heather Wallaga live now at the airport with reaction to that white knuckle ride. Heather?
Well, Steve, that packed flight was forced to make an emergency landing here at RDU Tuesday evening. But it was the moments leading up to that terrifying ordeal that had passengers panicked and fearing for their lives.
I was going to die. And that's what everybody on that plane thought, that we were all going to die. Just by one word of the captain.
Shelley Wills was on her way home from a birthday trip to Tampa when Southwest Flight 3426 took a dramatic drop midair.
He says we're going down, and everybody's looking around like, is this a joke? Is he serious? And then when he felt the nosedive.
Passengers went into panic mode. Wills, a nurse, tried helping the first-time flyer seated next to her who was clutching her chest.
I'm just thinking, oh my God, she's going to scare herself into having a heart attack.
She says passengers began reaching for their cell phones, desperately trying to reach loved ones. Wills typed this message to her daughter.
It says, "I love you, Alyssa. My plane is going down."
Minutes later, Wills says the Boeing 737 leveled out and went on to make an emergency landing at RDU.
And the last words were, "Thank you for hanging with us."
In a statement, Southwest Airlines says Flight 3426 experienced a maintenance alert as they were on descent into RDU. The captain declared an emergency and descended the aircraft to 25,000 feet where the alert was resolved. Throughout the remainder of the descent, the flight was normal, landed uneventfully, and was not met by emergency vehicles. ABC 11 has learned the alert went off due to irregular cabin pressure. A spokesperson says the aircraft was checked out and is now back in service. According to flight stats, it took crews just 1 hour to fix the plane before it went on to Baltimore. Wells says the terrifying ordeal has her thinking twice about flying with the airline again.
Because you think of your kids, your family. I think they just could have handled it a little bit differently.
And the FAA is now investigating. According to the agency, 29 reports involving Southwest Boeing 737-700 series have been reported since 2008. And, Steve, we're still waiting on incidents reports involving this particular plane.
Let us know when you learn more. We understand why it was such a terrifying flight for them. Amazing report from RDU tonight. Heather Wallaga, thank you.
A mid-air scare on a Southwest plane bound for Raleigh. Flight 3426 was making its way to RDU Tuesday evening when the aircraft lost much of its altitude.
The pilot came on the PA system and said, "We're going down."
That announcement was followed by a dramatic descent from 40,000 feet to just 9,900 feet in about 10 minutes. A cockpit recording with air traffic control confirms the rapid fall.
We just want to get to 10,000 feet in case the trips again. Down to 1-1,000, correct? Southwest 3426. Thank you.
Phyllis Spann says she and her husband panicked.
We were clenching hands and we said, "I love you," and kissed, and I shut my eyes just waiting for it all to be over.
Several other passengers who reached out to ABC 11 say they also feared for their lives.
The young lady that was sitting beside me, she said, "Excuse me, sir, but would you please hold my hand?" After I held her hand, I just began to pray, and I just didn't stop.
Southwest Airlines says irregular cabin pressure caused the sudden dip at no fault of the pilot. In an email to passengers, nearly 24 hours later, the airline issued an apology, saying as the captain was communicating his plan with flight attendants, he inadvertently activated the PA system. "We sincerely regret any confusion." Passengers were later given $200 vouchers.
It was not treated like it was a special flight and that we had a horrifying experience. We just landed and we departed the plane.
Ted Gale says fellow passengers overreacted to the incident. He's satisfied with the airline's response.
The people in the row around me, we were all pretty quiet. Once it was over, I kind of just put it aside. It didn't strike me as that big of a deal in retrospect.
Southwest says pressurization issues are infrequent. They say the pilot handled the incident professionally and safely. Tonight, the airline says they regret any uneasy feelings among passengers. At RDU, Heather Wallaga, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Right now at 4:30, we've heard the fear from the passengers, and now we're looking into how the pilot of a Southwest flight could have avoided the panic on the plane.
We spoke with two pilots this afternoon who experienced the same pressure problems in midair. I-Team reporter Heather Wallaga is live at RDU. And Heather, you've been digging into this for days, and you've uncovered a sort of communication breakdown. Explain that to us.
Well, Anna, when a pilot experiences a pressurization issue like the one on Tuesday, the first thing they're trained to do is put on their oxygen mask. The second item on that checklist is to establish communication with the crew. Well, that's where the breakdown occurred. You see, there are a few ways that a pilot can communicate: via headset, on a handheld microphone, or by using the mic on the oxygen mask. As the plane started to descend, the pilot put on his mask. Well, moments later, passengers on Southwest Flight 3426 say he announced over the PA system, "We're going down." But the airline says the pilot accidentally activated that switch instead of the one used to communicate through that mask. Experts we spoke with say it's a simple mistake in a high pressure situation.
It's very, very simple to push the wrong button and be the PA switch versus the interphone switch. And in that situation, when the pilot's talking to the first officer, he's aware of what's going on. And from the sounds of it, he's telling the first officer, hey, we're going down, which means in short terms, we're going to descend down to the altitude we need to go down to. And the first officer, because he's in the situation, he's fully aware of what's going on. So for him, it's not a big deal. Now, you take that out of context and you put it into the public's eye, and you have a PA being made to people at the same time the plane is descending. Now you have hysteria because people think, oh my gosh, we are going down.
Now, that plane was fixed and put back into the air within an hour. Coming up at 5:30, we look into whether it should have been put back into service so quickly or if it should have stayed grounded for a more thorough investigation. Live at RDU, Heather Wallaga, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
We sent Heather Wallaga digging for more answers today to find out why a Southwest Airlines jet that had a pressurization problem made a nosedive earlier this week and was then allowed to take off from RDU just an hour after that really frightening ride. Heather broke this story earlier this week. It's now capturing a lot of national attention. She's live at the airport with the new details to show us what she's uncovered. Heather?
Well, Steve, one of the questions that we have been asking is why this plane was put back into service so quickly. According to the FAA, the airline is authorized to diagnose and then fix any maintenance issues that arise before putting it back into service. But it was the communication breakdown that happened midair that really scared some passengers. And tonight, experts are weighing in on what could have gone wrong. The pilot on Southwest Flight 3426 sprang into action Tuesday when his plane began losing cabin pressure. The aircraft made a dramatic descent from 40,000 feet to just 9,900 feet in about 10 minutes.
I fly a 737 also. My assumption is that one of his air conditioners, which provides pressurization to the airplane, was malfunctioning. And because of that, when that happens, the first thing that you do is that you have to descend to a lower altitude.
Tal Holloway, a 30-year veteran, says pilots are then trained to put on their oxygen mask. But it's what happened next that had passengers panicked. The pilot accidentally announced over the PA, "We're going down," a message meant for crew members.
It's very easy to hit the wrong button on the audio panel. He's telling the first officer, hey, we're going down, which means in short terms, we're going to descend down to the altitude we need to go down to. And the first officer, it's not a big deal. Now, you take that out of context and you put it into the public's eye, at the same time the plane is descending, now you have hysteria.
Jeff Ashburn has dealt with pressurization issues before.
The pilots are very busy, could well be very busy during this time, taking care of the problem, and that's fine, that's good. But once you get control of the situation, or certainly by the time you get on the ground or at the gate, you really do want to communicate, calm the passengers, communicate with them.
But passengers say that never happened, even though the pilot was able to correct the problem and make a safe landing.
I think it was handled the way it should have been handled. The mistake that was made was that his communication.
Now, Southwest says the pilot handled the incident professionally and safely. And Steve, the airline has since issued vouchers and an apology to passengers via email.
Those pilots you interviewed today, Heather, make a very good point. There's a big difference between saying we're going down and we're descending. We're going down to a lower altitude. So as you point out, it's all about communication, and that's where the breakdown appears to have been this time.